Hello, my name is Loretta Hayes and I am from Hayes Sewing Machine Company, and welcome back to our creative videos. And today what I'm going to be working on is a simple panel quilt that is done, it's called Blush, that's what the panel is called. And there is a free download for this pattern off of Northcott's website, so northcott.com. But I really wanted on this particular video to not just follow the pattern. I wanted to show you how I do my quilts where I have cornerstones. So cornerstones being the small squares that are in your borders that require a little bit of measuring. So for my particular technique, what you need, the absolute musts, is you must have a tape measure. And then you need a paper and pen to write down some measurements as we go. Because we tend to think of the measurements after, we've put a couple of borders on, and then we start taking measurements, and there's a much easier way of doing it. So our first border is going to be this 1.5 inch border, really cute little print going on here. Okay, and so it's going to go like that. And we're going to have a black cornerstone on the corner. So what we want to do first, so we usually think, oh, well, I'll sew these side borders on and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do at the top. But in reality, it's so much easier if we go ahead and we do our measurement now. So what we want to do is we want to take our tape measure, get your panel laying flat, and we want to measure across the panel. So when I measure across the panel here, I have 21.5 inches.
Make sure it's even.
It is. All right, so that measurement is what you are going to write down so that we have what we need to cut later on. 21.5. Now, pop those things away. We're going to then take and we're going to treat this as if it was just a regular border quilt. I'm going to start out by sewing the long borders on the sides. And so I'm just going to extend a little bit of extra fabric off the end. I don't want to use this salvage edge. So I'm going to line that up and I'm going to go ahead and 1/4 inch seam all the way down that side. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we'll stitch along. The funniest thing on this particular panel is when I first took a look at it, plants are usually bigger at the bottom and then smaller at the top.
Oh, but that's not how they printed it.
That is not how this one is, and we know because the butterfly would, the blood would be draining to its little head. So it really wouldn't make any difference while we were sewing, but if you're going to put a rod pocket on it and hang it, it would make a difference then. All right, so we're going to stitch that down on that side. Okay, we'll cut the thread, and then I'm going to flip around, and I'm going to add my strip onto the other side. And typically if I'm doing a border quilt, I do the long sides first. So I'm always doing this part, not the top and the bottom. And you want to do that because oftentimes when they're calculating fabric, how many strips you need to cut to do a border, they are assuming that you are doing the long side first. right, so we have our 2 side borders done. Didn't cut them to length, just sewed them on, had a little bit of extra fabric. I'm now going to press this to the border. So Pam, you can just hang out. Right, so all pressed. So now we're going to come to the rotary mat and we're going to take it and we're going to line up our rotary ruler so that one side of our rotary ruler is on the cut edge of the panel and one side of one line in the rotary ruler is in the seam that we just made. We want to go ahead and we want to clip that, but we want to use the rotary mat to do that. The danger is this. Oftentimes we'll have a skinny border and we'll be like, oh, well, I'll just fold it over and I'll just cut it with my scissors. And it's never truly square. And it really does need to be square if we're going to put cornerstones in. We really would like it to be square at all times, but cornerstones in particular. So once again, we're going to line up along the edge, line up in the seam. We're going to clip that off, and we're going to do that on both sides. Oops, I got that one done. Where's the other one?
Should be 4, huh?
Yeah, there should be 4. Last time I checked. Rectangle has 4 corners. All right. So, we now have our 2 sides on, and now we're ready for that seam where we want our corners. So usually this is when I think about like, okay, I now need to cut that strip so I can add those 2 squares onto it. And so what ends up happening is you like measure from here to here, and then you're like, okay, I got to add a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this side, and I got to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance on that side. However, because we measured it first before we put the borders on, that takes care of everything. So that 21.5 measurement is all we need. So we're going to take our strips, and I pre-cut these. I'm just going to double check them here. Yep, to 21.5. So I've got 2 strips. So you'll see it's going to go like that. Okay, and it's going to have my extra seam allowance so that I can sew my black square on both ends. All right, so let's go ahead and do that and prep those strips. And I think with this one, this particular one, this fabric has a stripe in it. So I think I would like to have the stripe going up. So I'm going to pay attention and make sure that each one of them has the stripe going up. So we'll go there. Okey-doke. So now we're going to come in. We're going to clip this apart, and we need to press our seam allowances. Now, typical quilting is we press to the darker fabric, but when we're doing a cornerstone, we pressed our seam allowances towards the border on the sides, so we need to press our seam allowances towards the border on the cornerstone as well. So we'll go ahead and press that. Alrighty, so now we have our strip, and it should line right up with our panel. So I like this corner and the other corner to be right on. And so when I do my cornerstones, I take it, our seam allowances are going opposite because we press them towards the border on both pieces, and I'm going to do a quick quilt tack right on the corner there. If you figure there's only going to be 4 of them per border, that seems a reasonable thing to get it accurate. So we'll come in, we'll line that up. So we'll check them out, see if we like them. That one is not as good as I would like it to be, so I'm just going to grab a hold of the thread, pull the quilt tack out, so I don't have to seam ripper a good hunk of the border to get it accurate. So we'll pop that one back in. Much better. All right, so now when we lay this up, we should look at it, and because we measured it, it should really be pretty much the same size. If we had a slight variation, maybe in the pressing we've stretched it a little bit, then we would put the larger piece on the bottom. So we're going to stitch this on. And with the weight of your panel, the panel will tend to slide to the left. So just make certain that you do see a little bit of your panel edge when you're stitching your border on. What's kind of nice with this, because the panel is framed, I can see a little bit of green on that black strip over there. So long as that's consistent, I know my edges are lined up. And so we will stitch. Go through our quilt tack. And then we will flip it around and do the same. So we'll take our piece. Do our quilt tack. Line up our last one. Check them out. That one looks nice. That one looks nice. And then we'll do a quick look. And to my eye, I would say maybe just a little bit bigger on the border side. So I'm going to flip it over and put that on the bottom. So that, once again, could just be a little bit of a pressing, stretching situation. It could be that my panel wasn't cut exactly right. There's not a whole lot in it. But anytime you see a slight difference in size, always put the bigger one on the bottom, and then that feed dog will help feed that in, and you won't end up with a little tuck at your cornerstone. All right, so I'm gonna just press these towards the border. And so we have our first border with cornerstones on.
That looks
So we've got the
lovely.
little black, and I like that. It's kind of pulling from the background of the panel. Now, at this point, we're ready to move on to our next border. We want to pause, even if you have to write a Post-it note and stick it up on the machine to say, measure before you put the side borders on. So I'm going to take my tape measure, and I'm going to measure across. Okay, so I am 23 and a quarter. Maybe it's 23 and a half. It's just a little buckled up there. And because I wasn't sure, I'll do a quick double measure up at the top just to check it out. Yeah, 23 and a half will do it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to write 23 and a half down.
Seems
because
so
it's all
clear.
so clear now, right? All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and sew my long sides on and clip them, and we'll be right back. All right, so we are back. So I have attached my side border on, this beautiful coordinating print that goes with the panel. And so I've sewn that on both sides. I have rotary cut them even. I then took my 23 and a half inch measurement and added my cornerstones onto that 23 and a half inch section. And so now all we have to do is the two seams on the top and the bottom. So now we can come in. Once again, I'm going to do a quilt tack because I want that corner to line up exactly. It's funny, the one at the top will usually line up without any issues at all because you're only sewing like about 4 inches or so there. But it's this one at the bottom that after sewing the length of the border tends to shift you know, 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. So having it tacked down makes it so that that's not going to happen. All right, so there's our first tack, first border tacked, and we're gonna hold this up.
You gonna look?
Do a quick, oh, yeah, that might be nice.
I'm sure they're perfect.
I'm getting ahead of myself. Actually, they look good. All right, but thank you for the reminder. All right, so we're looking pretty equal, so we'll just go ahead and have the border on the top. Stitch right through our quilt tack, and then remember that the weight of the panel will tend to pull that bottom layer to the left, so just make certain that you can see just a hair of it. We don't like to seam ripper at the best of times, but along a border is a long seam ripper. So just by being aware, we can avoid that. So we'll stitch through there. All right, that takes care of our bottom border. And so let's go ahead and flip it around, and we'll put this on the top. Put our quilt tack on there. And our last quilt tack, assuming they look good. Looking nice. And looking nice. Awesome. All right, so we're gonna just do a quick double check, make sure that they look even. And they do. And what's nice is they will. I mean, we measured, so it should be pretty accurate. Let me give this a quick press. Do you want to swing around in front, maybe? All right. So there is our
lovely.
quilt. The quilt size when it's finished is 31 by 50. But honestly, if you wanted to enlarge the quilt, you could create another border with another cornerstone. Just add as you go. The key to the cornerstones is measuring it before you put the side panels on. So if we wanted to add another border, I would measure here, get that measurement, write it down, and then go ahead and do the borders just as we have done. It's a fun way of adding a little pop of color to the corners of your quilt. And sometimes I'll add cornerstones for a very practical reason. Sometimes I may not have quite enough fabric to do the borders all the way up. So by adding the cornerstone, you know, I'm like 4.5 inches shorter on this end and that end. So sometimes it's just about making the fabric fit on there. But it's a lovely way of adding cornerstones on. So we shall see you next time on our creative videos.